everyone. I started attending conferences like this, and at that time we used to attend in person, some 15 years ago. My objective then was to introduce the industry to a small company that had just started in about the year 2000. Today, in 2021, I'm amazingly proud to present how far we have come in the area of enterprise labeling. Amy Wright, Zimmer Biomet's labeling manager, is going to present an overview of some of the decision processes that they went through in selecting eventually our software, ROBAR, for their global labeling system. She'll also go over some of the challenges that Zimmer Biomet and Innovatum faced together in implementing an extraordinary, and yes, I am biased, global labeling system. Obviously, I and Amy are very proud of our achievements as individuals and members of a much larger team. I do have one request, however. What Amy is going to present today is from the perspective of a behemoth global corporation. Keep in mind, the principles and challenges remain somewhat the same for much smaller companies. The capabilities and challenges discussed by Amy do apply to much smaller companies in proportion to the size of the company. So sit back and relax and enjoy the outcome of over 10 years of trials and tribulations that has brought Zimmer Biomet and Innovatum to this phenomenal level of success. And thank you for your attention.
Hello, thank you for joining us. My name is Amy Wright. I am labeling manager in our global labeling department within Zimmer Biomet. Today, we're going to discuss considerations for an end-to-end labeling implementation and optimization. So first thing I want to go through is who's Zimmer Biomet. And Zimmer Biomet was founded in 1927 to produce aluminum splints. Since then, Zimmer Biomet is a global medical technology leader headquartered in Warsaw, Indiana, with a comprehensive portfolio designed to maximize mobility and improve health. We seamlessly transform the patient experience through our innovative products and suite of integrated digital and robotic technologies that leverage data analytics, and artificial intelligence. With 90 plus years of trusted leadership and proven expertise, Zimmer Biomet is positioned to deliver the highest quality solutions to patients and providers. Our legacy continues to come to life today through our progressive culture of evolution and innovation. Zimmer Biomet has 18,000 employees with operations in 25 plus countries and sales in 100 countries. So let's go through the agenda. Today, we're going to talk about what is an enterprise labeling solution. We're going to talk about upgrading your current software or performing a new implementation. Next, we're going to talk about future integrations and planning. Then we'll talk about what it'll take to do an RFI, RFQ, or an RFP. Then we'll talk about implementation of the system. Next, we'll talk about execution missteps and lessons learned. And finally, we'll talk about Zimmer Biomet and the ROBAR global labeling system. So first, what is an enterprise labeling solution? To me, being with Zimmer Biomet for 16 plus years and being in labeling for 10 years now, to me, an enterprise labeling solution is enterprise labeling is a dynamic, scalable solution that allows for a data-driven approach that allows for standardization across a global organization footprint and can adapt to every changing and complex regulations and requirements. Next, we're going to talk about should you upgrade your current software or do a new implementation. Some things that I have gone through at Zimmer Biomet is essentially this. With the medical device regulation, we had all new sorts of regulations we had to meet. So for me, when some thoughts to consider when looking to implement or upgrade your end-to-end labeling solution is your first question should be, could your current solution handle these new regulations? Next one would be, is your system outdated? Are you going from a current version versus an end use version? Let's say example is your current version is version 5. The current company that you use for your software is at version 10. What's the difference between there? Next, I would say is this a COTS or a customized solution? That's one thing that you'll need to look at, because a lot of times if it is a commercial off the shelf COTS solution, it'll be seamless to then upgrade. It'll be minimal work to do the reconfiguration. If it's customized, you then have to go back through and make sure that every customized piece is then accounted for your new solution. Functionality difference between the versions of the software versus a new software implementation, you need to weigh those factors, see what the differences are. Is your software scalable? For me as Zimmer Biomet, software scalable is huge. Zimmer and Biomet merged 6+ years ago. And with the different time that we're in today, you have mergers, acquisitions, you need to account for making sure your labeling system is scalable. Next would be the cost to upgrade versus your new software implementation. We're in the COVID times. Everybody wants to ensure that we're saving money. So you need to make sure you're weighing the correct manner, upgrade versus new. And then next would be, could your current solution handle integration with an ERP system or PLM solution? Software changes every year. So companies tend to look at harmonizing software. What's the latest ERP? What's your latest PLM? So you want to be prepared for the future. I would say always look at what you do now, but think about the future when you're looking at upgrading or looking at a new implementation. So as I mentioned, let's look at MDR. So could your current solution handle new regulations? For us at Zimmer Biomet, EU MDR. So with that, you have so many new pieces of that regulation. There was CMR, there's implant card and label, sterile barrier, new symbologies, additional translations, electronic labeling, instructions for patient, and destination labeling. Also would be considered country-specific labeling. So for that for us at Zimmer Biomet, we needed to upgrade our labeling system. For the most part, it could handle all of these, but then when we looked at the country-specific labeling, that was one piece that we needed to upgrade for. So next thing I would want you to look at is your system outdated, the current version versus end use version? How easy would it be to upgrade to the latest and greatest version? Is it something that you can say, what's the difference between the systems? I only need to validate what the new features are. Is it something that you're so many versions difference that, yeah, you should probably revalidate because you may have started your labeling system 6 years ago. Maybe your company has different validation requirements, and you may need to have a whole new validation packet. And if that's the case, it would probably be best to go ahead and validate the system from start to finish. And then it helps protect you in case you're audited or as you go to roll out your labeling system to additional sites and customers. Next, let's look at the commercial off-the-shelf versus customized solution. For me, COTS is always adaptable for system upgrade. It's readily available and it's dependable. Customized, it's company-centric. You have a longer lead time for upgrading and you have a potential for limited support. One thing to add for the customized, I mean, you may always have bits and pieces of your system that may have to be customized. That's not a big deal. But 9 out of 10 times, you want to be able to have that COTS system so that if something happens, your provider can easily provide support to help fix anything. If there's a new regulation, you can easily upgrade or make changes. If you have team member turnover so that it's easily accessible for training and so forth. So next, let's look at the functionality difference between versions of software versus new software implementation. Does your upgraded version have what your business requires? Is it time to look at other enterprise labeling solutions? And will a vendor force you for an upgrade? So for this is where you have to outweigh some of those pieces there. Is, again, if you're a few versions behind, let's say you're at version 5, the company is at version 10, and they actually have new versions in the works, they may force you for a complete upgrade. Now, that's not a big deal. You just have to outweigh and you have to review what's the best interest for your company. Now, sometimes when you do go from a change that big of a gap, I would recommend always look to see if this is the best software for you. Now, when you look at other enterprise labeling solutions, you have to look at what you have today versus what these other companies may provide. And we'll get into that in a little bit more slides. So next step will be, is your solution scalable? Mergers and acquisitions. Can your solution handle this? Increase production. Again, can your solution handle this? Increase data management. Can your solution handle the number of records? If you have the mergers and acquisitions, let's say Zimmer and Biomet, when we merged, let's say Zimmer had over 100 and some thousand SKU item numbers, Biomet may have had 250,000. Can your solution handle bringing all of that together under one roof? Next would be increase country-specific regulations. Can your solution handle the nuances of that? Every country comes out with their own flavor of regulation. We know it's probably only a matter of time before additional countries outside of Europe mimic EU MDR. And then to what scale are they going to take it to? Could they take the buddy, the basic UDI, or the CMR details to a whole new level? You have to be prepared for that. Next would be your increased data queries. Can your solution handle team members globally pulling copies of labels and data extracts? For me, if my team wasn't able to help provide training to other team members globally, we would need a team just to pull data and label requests for them with remediations, with EU MDR, with other MPI, tons of different team members globally for registrations. For tenders, they pull the labels and the labeling content from the labeling system to then make sure that other systems have the right details, that the regulatory documentation has what they need. So let's talk about cost to upgrade versus new software implementation. So upgrade. Does your software meet your business needs? New implementation. Does your software, again, meet your business needs? You have to think about upgrading versus new implementation. And it's a lot. It's overwhelming, especially as we get into this presentation and we start to talk about your request for information, your request for quote, and your request for proposal. It's very overwhelming. Demos can be very overwhelming. And the first thing, my recommendation to you is you document, you make a list. What does your company need for a successful labeling system platform? And then you think about what is coming down the pipeline for the future. And merging those details together will then help you look at, do I do just a simple upgrade, or do I completely go with a new enterprise labeling solution? So as we previously talked about, could your current solution handle integration with a new ERP or PLM solution? At Zimmer Biomet, we are in the process of consolidating our ERP solutions from over the years of mergers and acquisitions. We have a hodgepodge of them. And so we're trying to get a one ERP platform. It's going to take many years. We're working on it, but you need to make sure that your labeling solution should have an interface to your ERP, and it should have an interface to your PLM system, because your PLM, which is your product lifecycle management, is key to successful product development and design controls. Tying that label back to your design history file is critical. Tying it back to the risk management file, to all the different attributes within that risk management file. Now, your ERP system, which is your enterprise resource planning, that gives you the success for purchasing and manufacturing. That piece there will then set up for success for distribution and for the initial upfront manufacturing piece. You'll be able to then have your label communicate with the ERP system, see what your batch quantity is. If there's been anything that got scrapped, your quantity could be updated. And then you can control how many labels print during the production environment. It will help reduce the risk of scrapping of labels. It'll help reduce, any documentation errors on that device history record. So enterprise labeling solution integrated with a PLM and ERP, for me, is a successful production labeling and batch history. So let's talk about the future integrations and planning. This graphic here kind of made me chuckle when I found it, to where it's integration, it's not magic. It's planning and proven methodologies. Being through quite a few integrations myself, as we're working towards a harmonized labeling solution, this made me laugh. So when you're working towards a harmonized labeling solution amongst the company, the few things you have to take in consideration is the consolidation of the ERP systems, new regulations. For example, I listed UTMed. That system, the sandbox is open, companies are looking through it. Are you doing a new PLM system? And then cost savings. So, which could be country-specific labeling or e-labeling. Take those in consideration for when you're doing integrations and some planning. So here we're going to touch base on that RFI, RFQ, and RFP that I was mentioning. So request for information. This is where you're going to take that listing of what does your company need today from a labeling system platform, and what is coming down your pipeline, to then request that information, and definitely don't shy about it. Hit up as many companies as you can, get their responses, evaluate their responses, because then you may be surprised by what you see and what you don't see. There may be companies that are head to head, and one thing that could drive one company ahead of another one could be support. It could just be how they handle responses and so forth. So your request for information is where you're going to get all that research. You're going to be looking for the overview. You're going to be exploring that market, and it's educating you on what's out there. So next is once you determine who you get a feeling for, who you want to move forward with, is you start that RFQ, which is your request for quotation. So you're going to be buying that specific product. You're looking for the lowest price. You're sourcing particular services. And then here it has the RFP, which is your request for proposal. So for me, I think the two should be switched around, particular to where I would do the RFP then the RFQ, because you're looking for that strategic supplier and you're doing that bigger picture and you're shopping around. So let's go to the next one here. So request for information, again, what's your business requirements? What's your needs? You're creating that document, as I mentioned, for your enterprise labeling solution providers. so that they know what it'll take to meet your needs. You're planning for the future, and then you're seeing responses. So RFQ, the request for the quotation. Now, here, price comparisons that I think of that you would definitely want to include is the project scoping and implementation timing. There could be travel with that. There could be, you need a plan for project meetings and so forth. You also need to account for assistance with or handling the data migration, validation test scripts, the validation assistance, on-site implementation support, long-term support, and then lastly, the licensing, the production and label management licensing. I want to make sure that we're clear on that, because you typically should have two different avenues of licensing. You're going to have your production licensing on how you print from your labeling system, but then you're going to have for your label management site for creating the labels, potentially routing the labels for approval, and so forth. So let's talk about the request for proposal. What does the enterprise labeling solution provider propose for successful integration? You need to look at that. You need to look at the discounts. And then, like I mentioned before, the support. The support for me is a big piece, because you never know when you're going to have a fire. Your day can change 15 times within, a period of an hour. And having a company that will get on the phone with you if you have a priority one issue with one of your facilities and you have production down is huge. So you want to definitely research the support. If they have a call center, test it out. Don't be shy to test it out. And definitely ask multiple scenarios for the support. All right, guys. So implementation of a system. You did all that nitty-gritty work up front. You requested all those details. You chose your system. You're getting ready to start implementing. You went through all the planning. You got all of your POs ready. You're ready to start. So now we're going to cover some avenues here, and this is a lot. Don't be overwhelmed. And trust me, implementing a new system, it's not a 3-month thing. It's typically a year to 2 year plus avenue that you're going to go down. So we're going to talk about planning, budget, business requirements. Then we're going to talk about the designing infrastructure. We're going to talk about the template and format designing, data migration, software validation, your change control board approvals, your go live readiness, go live, hypercare, and then support after hypercare, because you got to make sure your production team members are taken care of after that hypercare period. So let's get started, guys. So implementation of a system where you're doing planning, budgets, and business requirements. So planning, what will it take for a successful implementation? One, the biggest thing for me is you have to meet with those impacted departments. So everybody that has skin in the game, for example, you have to talk to them. You don't want somebody being surprised and not in the know of something that's going on with this. Because once you have that approval and you're starting, they should be in the know. So example is I list, global master data management team members, production, any of your ERP, IT team members, your PLM team members, etc. Anybody that needs to help ensure for a successful go live, they should be up front. They should be part of that team to then start doing that business requirement with you. So you have your budgets, you have your validation, programming, project management, infrastructure, printers, computers, workstation, scanners, resources. You need to make sure you have that 20-30% safety net, etc. You have to account for all of that. So that's why up front, when you're doing that planning, you need to be able to have those team members right there with you to discuss everything that's needed in that budget. So business requirements, again, goes back to that planning. You have to have those team members there with you as you're doing that business requirement document, because that's going to be your Bible. pretty much for making sure you did all those checking off the boxes. And then those team members that more than likely are going to be signing off on that business requirement documents, they may also be team members that have to sign off on your change control board approvals to be able to launch it into your production environment. So here on your business requirements document, you're going to list out all requirements for that system for what it's going to do within the business and production areas. And trust me, if you have to go back and you have to revise that business requirement document, also known as a BRD, don't be ashamed of that. You're gonna miss things. Just make sure that you go through it with a fine-tooth comb before you actually start doing some programming. So next, you went through all that planning, you have your team members aligned, you're gonna start designing infrastructure. So this is in the IT world. You have to think about, how many sites or vendors are going to utilize your system. What's your global footprint going to look like? Disaster recovery, you always need to prepare in case something was to happen. Your load balancing, because last thing you want is you don't want team members saying that your system's being very slow and it's going to start impacting production. You don't want them affecting their numbers. And then scalability, again, it always goes back to that scalability of if you're doing mergers and acquisitions. So here on the screen, you're going to see this is a picture of Zimmer Biomet's infrastructure here, where you can see there's a primary server, there's the secondary servers. It shows some ERPs. This is just kind of high level. Showing disaster recovery. You always need to make sure that, every year you're checking your disaster recovery, because more than likely your system should be considered in the validation world as a mission critical system. If your system goes down, your production goes down. So, and in Zimmer Biomet's case, our distribution area could go down as well for country specific labeling. So just keep that in mind as you're designing your infrastructure. Load balancing, make sure you keep your production team members happy, the scalability, and then you have to make sure that you're protecting your system by the disaster recovery. So let's talk about the other piece of the labeling system, which is probably my favorite part, is template and format design. So here, this is what says what your labeling is. I know I will speak for Zimmer Biomet, but when we merged Zimmer and Biomet, and we have other companies that we have acquired, we have a hodgepodge of labels, and you have tons of designs. And the last thing that you want to hear, and it's not a good feeling, I've been in that position, is to where when you're meeting with a healthcare provider, that end user, is they're like, it doesn't feel good hearing them say, if I walk into a room where we store our implants and I can't make heads or tails out of specific labeling, like I want to be able to look at a cart and know exactly where the item number is, where that sizing is, that expiration date. And you have, between all your different divisions, you have a hodgepodge of different labeling, and that nurse can't pull or look at that rack with ease. They have to physically pull it up. They have to look at it because your company has a bunch of different designs. That means you need to start harmonizing your labels. And that's what we're trying to do at Zimmer Biomet today. So I wasn't going to have any issue sharing with you one of our non-sterile designs here. It was something that we started to do for MDR. We're taking advantage of it. We're doing our what we call ZB Harmonize, where we're going to try to come up with that footprint to where between all of our different divisions, we start coming out with a harmonized design. And your labeling system has to be able to allow you to do that. So with that is you want to be able to have a labeling system that internally and externally can have the same labels. So my first bullet point of labeling system vendor to handle, or it's internally. You want to be able to have that same design internally and externally. So if you have a third-party vendor who can package and label complete your product, you should be able to produce that same label internally and externally. Now, VB scripting for us at Zimmer Biomet is huge, because as you see on the label to the right, you're seeing some boxes there. So we actually have the design with more boxes. And if we're not going to use all those boxes, you don't want to see a blank box on your label. Well, VB scripting allows us to then take that box off that label design. Layers help with different settings within that template if you need it. There's consolidation. So by able to do VB scripting and layers, you can then consolidate your formats, and then you have less formats you have to maintain. Test printing, for me, test printing, AQL sample sizing, 100% inspection during that integration is huge. You have to make sure different makes and models of printers, as I'm saying down below, for versatile printing between that inkjet and thermal transfer printers. I'll get into that in just a minute, but you have to make sure when you're doing that AQL sample sizing or the 100% inspection is that your alignment is good, making sure that you have no issues with resolution of symbologies. So test printing, the consolidation, the way you design your labels when you're going into a labeling system is huge. So template and format, I'm going to call it template or format. There's, it could be a mask, it could be whatever you want to call it. Design printer settings. So for us at Zimmer Biomet, this piece is huge. We have, and you'll see it further in the slide deck, but we have 90 plus third-party vendors that print from our labeling system. As I mentioned above, making sure that you have a labeling, if you can print this label at a vendor or internally, you need to be able to make sure you can have that label design work across multiple makes, models, DPIs, and then color codes. So you want a labeling system that can have color codes. Your marketing team loves color. They love product images, probably that are of the actual product. So make sure that your label design can handle that. And then last one here is, I'd say, versatile printing between the inkjet and thermal transfer printers. So for me, that label design, I may have that label stock to where it's the same size. It's like a 4 by 2.5 inches, to where I could have that same label stock material where I have it for thermal transfer or inkjet. And it just depends on where it's printing. Internally, I may have it be on the inkjet stock. Externally, at a third-party vendor, it could be at a thermal transfer printer, because your vendor is not going to spend thousands of dollars on an inkjet printer. So next, let's talk about data migration. So validation of data migration. This is typically where you want your labeling system company to assist you with, because then you're going to be doing some AQL sampling versus 100% inspection of the content. There's going to be data changes potentially made that you may document your business requirement if you're doing a labeling system implementation because of a new regulation. So let's say I'm listing here Brexit, there could be MDR, we could have a remediation, and then test printing. So that data migration is where you're doing that mapping of your content to the new data fields and so forth. You have to make sure you inspect all that content. So next, software validation. So I like this graphic here because it's showing you the different pieces here. So obviously you have your val plan, you're gonna do your user requirements, you're doing your functional spec, your system spec, you're gonna do your risk assessment, and then you're doing your IQ, OPQ speed, we do a speed test, and you have your validation report. So here, software validation is all that for the system itself, but you need to get nitty gritty. You need to also consider that production printing. You should have a workstation install qualification, the operation qualification, the performance qualification, and we include a speed test just so that we can document how fast those labels are printing. In case something happens in the future, you can see, did the printer slow down? Did the system slow down, and so forth. Reporting tools, definitely need to validate that. Your label design piece, approval system, the data management, your country-specific labeling, the interfaces, your integrations, and your middleware, communicating between the systems, and then end-to-end. So for me, these are all of the different attributes or areas you have to look at validating when you're implementing a new system. So let's talk about change control board approvals. So your system should be installed within your development and QA environments. And then it's going to be ready for production. Now, you're going to have your infrastructure and your system validated. You should have security integrity. You should have support set up with your end user computing support team. That's typically your IT team. We have to call, make it a little difficult, and we call it the EUC team. And then your impacted business and technical lead approvals. All of that goes into your change control board approvals. You need to have all their sign-offs, and that's why it's good to have all those team members up front. Your project management team should make sure that they have a checklist, making sure that you're talking with all these teams, getting through all the checks and balances before you're doing that CABA board approvals. All right, so let's talk about go live readiness. So your system's installed to your production environment. You had your data migration installed. Your production workstations had that IQ, the OPQ, and speed test completed. Everything went great there. You have your security profile set up to where that grants team members system access. You're doing your team member training, which is on-the-job training, work instructions, so forth. You have your interfaces, your middleware activated for the production environment. You're doing dry runs. And then typically what you'd want to do is make sure that you have a go, no-go call with your team members. So you look at it multiple ways here. Your go, no-go call, that's with your team members that are part of that project. It may not be some of the direct ones, but if it is impacting their area that they're managing, they need to be on that go, no-go call. And what you're doing there is you're talking about what you did in that go live readiness to show that if you had any hiccups. If you had hiccups, then you do what's right and you postpone your go live. If everything's great, smooth sailing, your dry run went, amazing, you should have everybody saying go on your call. So then you're ready for go live. You're doing hypercare. A couple of things to think about here is, are you doing a big bang or are you going to do a rolling rollout? When I say a big bang is if you have multiple sites, are they all going live at one time? Or are you going to do a rolling rollout? Let's say, I'm going to say one facility has 15 computers, 15 workstations. You doing a big bang where all 15 are going live at once? Or are you going to do a rolling rollout to where you're doing one at a time and making sure everything goes smoothly? So you have options there, and you'd want to discuss with team members to see what's the best. And sometimes, depending on what the system's doing, you may only be able to do a big bang, but you just have to weigh what's going on. You'll want to monitor your system and the interfaces, make sure everything looks like it's working smoothly as you're in the production environment. You need to check in with your production operations. For me, I like to go into the production areas, check to see what's going on. It's nice when they're not having any issues with your system, but yet they want to ask you what's going on with the barcode scanner, ask you to help fix that, or can you look at a printer? You then should have, during this, you should have what we consider like a war room, where all the team members that are doing your hypercare, they're together. And a great integration is where you're just sitting there waiting for somebody to get with you and that you're not reacting to issues. You want to make sure that your team members have contacts for the support. You should be able to give them a presentation. They should all have a listing of your cell phone numbers and how to get a hold of you. So lastly, for this one is you have to determine, are you doing on-site hypercare or remote hypercare? I've done both. I prefer on-site, but sometimes that's just not, the day and age that we're in now. You may have to do remote, and that's fine. Just make sure that you're on a Zoom, a WebEx, Teams, whatever, so that you can make sure that you are giving immediate care. And then support after hypercare. You're done. They've been on the system for 10 days, let's say. You need to make sure that they have that context again. Who can they contact for support? Is there a service request system to put in a ticket that you need some assistance? Is there a 24/7 support call line that they can have? And then letting them know, business versus IT support. Maybe helping paint that picture for them to know if there is a label design error issue. IT is not going to necessarily support you for that. That'd be your business team. Or if there's a printer issue, it'd probably be your IT team that would be helping. So some execution missteps and lessons learned. You know, you need a plan for the unexpected and the not best case scenario. It may not be all sunshine and rainbows, so you gotta plan for the not the best case. Proper scoping of consuming impacting systems is huge right there. You don't want to forget a system. Notifications and communications, that's why I want to stress communication. Make sure your team members are always in the know, and do like a scrum email, making sure that as you're doing integration that they are up to date. They may not be in the know because that's not part of the area you're working on, but it's nice for them to be in the loop so that they understand what's going on, and rather than just thinking that they're not part of the project anymore. And then the timing of the change management. So I like to say, keep your team members in the know. Communication is always best. All right, so here, let's start talking. We're getting close to the end of the presentation here, guys. I want to show you what Zimmer Biomet and ROBAR have done with our enterprise labeling solution. So again, as already mentioned in our intro part of the video, is talked about our relationship and so forth. So here I want to go over and just give you some facts of where we're at today with the system. So today we have ROBAR at 25 plus Zimmer Biomet manufacturing facilities globally. We have 90 plus third-party vendors producing Zimmer Biomet product utilizing ROBAR. We have 500 plus different printers producing labels. To me, that's awesome. 14 different interfaces to other Zimmer Biomet systems. We have 2,000 plus team members internally using the system. And we have 300 plus third-party vendors using the system. So to give you a little bit more numbers, I love numbers to put it in perspective of what's going on here. So when you look at a production standpoint, in 1 year, we have processed 802,317 print jobs. With that is, of those print jobs, 51 million finished good labels have been printed, in which 1,087,782 were country-specific labels printed. That's amazing. This is what an integrated labeling solution should do for you. Now, some other things that Zimmer Biomet and ROBAR do together is, let's talk about MDR Label Inspections. MDR is the hot topic right now as we're working through our compliance. So within our European distribution center, we have a robust MDR Label Inspection system. They use our label master view. They ensure that the label that they have, we not only have Zimmer Biomet labels in there, but anything that Zimmer Biomet distributes that may not be our design control, we put a copy of that vendor label in our label master view to help with our MDR label inspections. We have a batch history table that helps for segregating product to where it could be segregating because, let's say, we may have dual manufacturing. So they may want, let's say, Biomet Orthopedics versus Zimmer Inc. You know, they may need to separate for whatever reason. That legal manufacturer in that table is huge for certain areas. If we're doing dual manufacturing, the manufacturing site, the GETON, the CE marking, and much more. That batch history table for our MDR inspections is critical for them to also help know MDD versus MDR product for the batches. And then we have the country-specific review. So we've been talking about destination labeling or country-specific labeling. For me, same thing. I call it destination labeling. This here is a phenomenal tool that we have to where what processes through destination labeling. You can see an example of the label, and you can see an example of the IFU based on the country that you may select. That piece there is huge for MDR label inspections, but also that tool is given to any of our team members globally that may want to do like queries and reports as they're pulling for their registration. So while we may design our label, as you saw in a previous slide, to only have the EFIGs, which is English, French, Italian, German, Spanish, country specific, they may need a copy of that, let's say, Polish label. That country specific review area, they can pull their country specific label for their registration. So just a little bit more tidbits just to let you guys know of how we utilize the system. But that is bringing us to the end of the presentation. I want to thank you, and thank you so much for sitting through this, and we'll be opening it up for some Q&A. Thank you.